Right now, if you get sick, you know exactly what to do. You go to a pharmacy, you read a label, you trust that someone in a lab, somewhere, already tested this for you. But for most of human history, none of that existed. No labels, no labs, no pharmacies. And yet your ancestors still healed wounds, fought off infection, and even survived surgery. Real surgery on the human skull thousands of years before anyone understood what a virus even was. So how did medicine actually work before medicine, as you know it, existed at all? The honest answer isn't luck. It's not superstition either, at least not entirely. It's something more patient, more brutal, and more remarkable than most people assume. Let's start with plants, because that's where almost everything begins. Ancient humans didn't have textbooks describing which plants healed and which ones killed. They had something slower and far more dangerous. Direct observation, tested across real lives, generation after generation. Someone, at some point, ate the wrong root and died. Someone else noticed a particular leaf seemed to calm a fever. Over centuries, that scattered, painful trial and error slowly became knowledge, passed down carefully, because getting it wrong wasn't a minor mistake. It was fatal. Willow bark is one of the clearest examples still recognized today. Multiple ancient cultures, entirely independently, discovered that chewing or brewing it seemed to ease pain and reduce fever. Centuries later, scientists identified exactly why. Willow bark contains a natural compound closely related to modern aspirin. Your ancestors had no idea about chemistry. They just knew, through repetition, that it worked. Why does that matter so much? Because it means ancient medicine wasn't random guessing dressed up as ritual. It was a genuine, if brutally slow, experimental process, refined over thousands of years without a single microscope. Archaeologists studying Shanidar Cave in Iraq found something that sparked enormous debate: pollen from several plants with known medicinal properties, buried directly alongside a Neanderthal skeleton. Some researchers argue this suggests deliberate medicinal use, perhaps even a kind of burial ritual involving healing plants. Others caution it could simply reflect seasonal flowers or the digging habits of small burrowing animals. The debate itself tells you something important. Even now, we're still trying to understand exactly how sophisticated this early plant knowledge really was. Plants weren't the only tool available, though. Wound care demanded something more immediate: honey. It turns out, genuinely works as a natural antiseptic. Modern science confirms it creates an environment hostile to many types of bacteria. Ancient humans didn't know the biology behind that. They simply noticed that wounds treated with honey seemed to heal cleaner, and passed that observation down as fact. Tree resins served a similar purpose in many regions, applied directly to open wounds to seal them and slow bleeding. And when bleeding was severe, when pressure and plants weren't enough, some groups turned to something more extreme: cauterization. Pressing a heated stone or ember directly against a wound to stop the bleeding through controlled burning. Splints and bandaging followed similar logic elsewhere on the body. Strips of hide or plant fiber, wrapped tightly around an injury, served the same basic function bandages serve today, protecting a wound from dirt and further damage while it healed. Some groups packed wounds with specific mosses known to absorb moisture and resist bacterial growth, an intuitive solution to a problem they couldn't have explained in scientific terms, but clearly understood in practical ones. Think about the courage that required. On both sides, someone had to hold still. Someone else had to commit to the burn. Infection posed an entirely different kind of threat, one that could kill slowly, days or even weeks after the original injury seemed to be healing. Ancient healers noticed, long before anyone understood bacteria existed, that certain molds and fermented substances seemed to slow infection in some wounds. Some researchers believe this early, accidental observation may represent humanity's first crude steps toward what would eventually become antibiotics, discovered independently, over and over, by people with no concept of microorganisms at all. Dental problems, too, demanded real intervention, since a severe tooth infection could become life-threatening without any way to fully treat it. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites shows drilled teeth dating back thousands of years, using tools sharp enough to bore directly into a cavity and remove decayed material. Imagine holding still for that, with nothing resembling modern anesthesia. Someone had to have a steady hand, real skill, and a patient willing to endure it, because the alternative was often far worse. Childbirth carried its own body of specialized knowledge, passed almost exclusively between women across generations. Certain plants were used to ease pain during labor. Others were understood to help stop bleeding afterward. A genuinely dangerous moment in the ancient world. Experienced women within a group often served as the closest equivalent to a midwife, present specifically because they had witnessed enough births to recognize when something was going wrong and, just as importantly, what to do about it. Broken bones tell an even more striking story. A shattered leg, in the ancient world, should have been a death sentence. An injured person can't hunt, can't gather, can't run from danger. And yet, skeletal evidence from multiple archaeological sites shows individuals who survived severe fractures, sometimes for years afterward. That means someone recognized the injury. Someone immobilized the limb, likely using wood, bark, or hide as a crude splint, and someone else fed and protected that person for weeks, sometimes months, while they contributed nothing physical back to the group at all. Why would a group invest that much into someone who, for a while, couldn't help at all? Because losing them meant losing everything they knew. Their memory, their experience, their accumulated understanding of exactly which plant, prepared exactly which way, actually worked. And then there's the procedure that still shocks people today: trepanation. Deliberately drilling or scraping a hole directly into the human skull. It sounds almost impossible to survive. And yet, archaeologists have found trepanned skulls, showing clear bone regrowth around the opening, unmistakable evidence that the patient lived, sometimes for years after the procedure. Why would anyone attempt something this extreme? Researchers believe trepanation may have been used to relieve dangerous pressure after a head injury, to treat seizures, or in some cultures, to release what people believed were trapped evil spirits causing illness. The exact reasoning likely varied by region and era, but the outcome, in many documented cases, was survival. Real, verified, skeletal survival. Illness wasn't always understood as purely physical either. Many ancient societies treated healing as something that involved the mind and community just as much as the body. A designated healer or shaman often combined practical plant knowledge with ritual, chanting, or communal ceremony, and modern researchers increasingly recognize that this wasn't purely superstition layered on top of real medicine. The psychological comfort of ritual, the presence of a trusted community gathered around a sick person, likely had genuine, measurable effects on stress, pain perception, and recovery. Effects modern medicine now studies under far more clinical names. That detail alone should completely reshape how you picture ancient medicine. This wasn't blind superstition performed in ignorance. Someone had to understand anatomy well enough to avoid killing the patient instantly. Someone had to manage bleeding, infection risk, and recovery, all without antibiotics, without sterilization as you'd recognize it, and without any formal medical training whatsoever. None of this knowledge lived on paper. It couldn't. Writing, for most of this history, simply didn't exist yet. So where did it actually live? It lived in people, in an elder demonstrating exactly how to clean a wound, hands guiding hands. In a story told at just the right moment, warning a child away from a poisonous root. In a healer passing down years of hard-earned trial and error to a single trusted apprentice who would then carry that knowledge forward to the next generation. Losing one skilled healer wasn't just a personal tragedy. It could mean losing decades of irreplaceable medical knowledge in a single moment, knowledge that might never be fully rediscovered in time to matter. Picture what that loss actually looked like in practice. A healer who had spent 40 years learning which specific combination of plants stopped a certain kind of bleeding, which dosage helped rather than harmed, which symptoms meant a wound would heal on its own and which meant urgent intervention was needed. None of that lived in a book. All of it lived in one person's memory and in whatever they'd managed to pass on to an apprentice before illness, age, or accident took them. A single bad season, a single lost healer, could set an entire group's medical knowledge back by a generation or more. That's likely part of why so many ancient societies invested heavily in protecting their sick, their injured, and their elderly, rather than abandoning them the moment they stopped being physically useful. It wasn't only compassion, though compassion was almost certainly part of it. It was also, quite literally, medical insurance for the entire group. Some of this knowledge never actually disappeared. Certain indigenous communities today still maintain plant-based medical traditions that trace back thousands of years, refined through exactly this same, slow, observational process, tested and adjusted across countless generations rather than in a sterile laboratory. Now think about your own relationship with medicine today. You take a pill without needing to know which plant it originally came from, or how many generations of trial and error it took to identify. You trust a system built on accumulated knowledge so vast, no single person could ever hold all of it. And that trust exists because somewhere, deep in your ancestry, someone else had to be the very first person willing to test whether a particular root would heal or kill. Right now, your local pharmacy holds shelves of medicine developed through careful, modern science. But underneath every single one of those solutions sits an older, far riskier foundation, built slowly and at real human cost, by people who had absolutely nothing to guide them except patience, memory, and each other.